Hi, my name is Ian Kinder. Welcome to the Live Safe Academy show. In this show, we're going to talk about how to set up your AR for success. And we're going to do that with somebody who's a close friend of mine, someone who has been a training partner for a long time, and somebody who has been an instructor on our staff for a long time. He's a phenomenal trainer. He has a lot of value to bring to this topic. If you feel that this show is helpful, you can help us, help you, and help other people too. And it's simple. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, share the show with other people. If you're listening to this on our podcast, share our podcast with other people, subscribe to our podcast. Then go to livesafeacademy.com/connect, where you'll have access to all of our podcasts, our videos, our articles, our in-person classes in the Detroit, Michigan area, and our live virtual classes that you can participate from anywhere in the world, including the live virtual class that we're talking about today, featuring my guest, where we're going to talk about how to set up your AR for success. So, Paul, I want to thank you very much for being on this show. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? And then once we talk about your background, let's talk about why this class that you're going to teach for us is so important.
All right, sounds good. As you guys, I'm Paul, right? The main thing about my background, I don't want to get too into the weeds about it, but the most important thing is that I've had 40 months roughly of combat experience where I carried in AR-15 or M4 every single day as my primary weapon. And I've trained hundreds of soldiers on how to use that weapon as their primary weapon. Have done this not just in the special operations community and in elite parts of the military, but I've also done this for the National Guard and for new soldiers as well. Most of the people that would take this class, most people trying to defend their homes, are not somebody who's been through a selection process and done years of training in the special operations community, or have done years of training and field exercises in the infantry. Most of your person who would buy and own an AR-15 for home defense is just a person who is your average person without much training at all, who is going to want to learn how to employ this weapon effectively if there's ever a threat. And there are certain considerations that you'll need when it comes to using and employing this weapon effectively. A lot of what you'll get in the law enforcement or tactical community are designed for people with training going into a certain type of environment that your average person defending their home isn't going to find themselves in, right? So having trained brand new soldiers on this weapon and going through it's about going what's through important and what is there's because there's so much we could talk about in a course. I could do 8 weeks, 8 hours a day on this weapon and spend range time and try to get proficient at it. But in a course that is going to teach you how to defend your home and to use it for self-defense, home defense, what are the most important parts? What are the things that you really need to know about this weapon? And so working with new soldiers and new people who've never, some cases, never fired a weapon before in their lives, and training them and teaching them about the weapon system and how to use it, well, that's something that I can offer to the public, to the average person who's interested. Um, about the weapon platform, I mean, the AR-15 is used in the military because it's so incredibly easy to use and effective. You have to understand that most people in the military are job focused, but most of the military is not, they're not combat arms. Most of the military are not infantrymen or special operations types that are shooting their weapon as a primary job. I want to say combat arms is only one out of every 8 or one out of every 9 soldiers, depending on where you're at, what base, what part of the world. Only one out of every 9 is actual combat arms, meaning they do combat as their primary job. Everyone else in the military has another job, but they're a soldier first. So how do we take that mechanic? How do we take that supply person that person just running a convoy from one base to another in a hostile area. How do we take that person and make them an effective fighter? What tools are we going to give them? Right? Their primary job actually isn't to fight, even though they're a soldier first. And so we want to choose a weapon system that's going to be easy to use as well as effective. It's going to give you the most bang for your buck, so to speak, in terms of time invested into training. And the AR platform for decades now has been the solution to that problem. They've thought about changing the primary weapon for the military. They thought about moving in different directions, getting different things approved. There are different systems out there that are very good. Some you could argue are better, but at the end of the day, the AR-15 is incredibly simple to use, and simple to use even with very little training, and very easy to upkeep and maintain as well. So it just makes it the optimal weapon rifle system for something like home defense, self-defense, if you're going to use a rifle for self-defense. And that's why it's so popular.
And those are really good points too, because there's so many new gun owners now that are they want to be prepared. They want to use an AR to help keep their family safe, but they don't really necessarily know the best way to do that. And there's a lot of information on YouTube, and that's great, but it's not all good information. And what makes this class unique is they're going to have a chance to interact with you just like a traditional in-person class, because they'll be able to ask you questions. So you're not just going to be pushing out information like in the video, but you're going to be there as a live Q&A so that they can ask questions, make sure they understand and are fully informed to make the choices that they feel are best for them. But it's not just for people who are brand new to guns. There's a lot of people out there who may have owned guns for a long time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're setting up their systems in the best way to give themselves the best chance of success, especially if they don't have field experience in law enforcement or the military, where you have that experience. And from experience, you can tell them what really matters and what doesn't matter. Because again, a lot of what you see on YouTube may make sense, but unless you're in those situations and having to use that information, you don't really necessarily know what's going to help, what's going to hurt, what's going to be just a waste of effort and money and expense versus what's going to actually give you a better chance of success. And I can tell you, especially where handguns are concerned, having been to a lot of homicide scenes, I can tell you that there are scenes where I can say with certainty that what got somebody killed is they either had the wrong weapon or they were carrying it in the wrong way so that they couldn't deploy it quickly and effectively. And of course, that applies just as much to a rifle as it does to a handgun. So let's talk about that. Why would somebody want an AR-15 over just a handgun as an example? There's certainly a lot of good options. We're not saying this versus that, but if somebody's making that selection of mine, do I go with the handgun? Do I go with an AR? When it comes to home defense, why would an AR be an advantage over, let's say, a handgun or even a shotgun?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I would say that it gives you, I mean, the AR-15 is a small enough weapon, depending on, of course, how long you get the barrel, but that's something we'll talk about in the course. But it's a small enough weapon where you can fight with it in tighter spaces, just like a handgun. You don't really lose anything, with the right techniques and tactics, but you have a lot of rounds and a lot less kick, a lot less kick into your body. It's easier to keep rounds on target with a rifle. I know in most tight spaces, you're not talking about having to aim out really far and hit a bullseye or anything like that. I mean, combat ranges are very tight and short, but people still miss all the time. And it's a lot more standard of error and possibility of error with the handgun, unless you have, of course, the right training. But there's still a lot more error that can happen, whereas a rifle is a lot less, just due to the barrel length and how you're holding it. And you can deal with two, depending on types of rounds you're using, penetrating through some, you could say, what would appear to be cover but really isn't, doors, wooden doors, drywall, stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot you can do with around itself, and but it's just incredibly easy to use. I can hand an AR-15. And a lot of people don't understand this. They think that they just don't understand how easy it is. I can hand an AR-15 to my 10-year-old, and he's going to be able to shoot probably relatively accurately with that. And versus if I were to hand him a handgun or a shotgun, and that's really the bottom line. It's just so incredibly easy and versatile. And one round, one standard magazine for an AR is 30 rounds. So we're talking about home defense, even though most gunfights are over very quickly. In an assault scenario, there's not that many rounds fired. If you're in your house, you just don't know how much or how long you're going to have to defend your position. And so having quite a few rounds available in a magazine, that's definitely an advantage. Having a magazine coupler, having a couple of mags with your rifle, stored with your rifle, having an extra magazine and the buttstock, attached to the buttstock, things like that. I mean, you now have plenty of rounds to work with, and it's very easy to change over, easy to get rounds on target. And I'm focusing again on the ease of the use and the ease of using the weapon. And but that's a big deal. It's a big deal because under a stressful situation, those little things matter. It can really be the difference between somebody, surviving or not surviving, as whether or not they can easily get rounds down range, as we say, or on target. But I mean, I'd say that's probably the main, reason for using an AR versus a pistol. And it's not versus. I mean, pistols are obviously good too, but rifle can, for home defense, reach out just a little bit further, a little bit more accurately. Chances are I'm not going to have to, but I mean, it just depends on the tactical circumstance, right? And so now I have something that's a bit more versatile for a circumstance that could be, I guess you could say a lot of different variables in that circumstances versus being attacked or mugged or something like that, when I'm walking to my car. I don't know if that answers it well, but
No, it makes perfect sense, and I agree 100%. I think most people are going to shoot a long gun platform better and more effectively with less training than a handgun, even though obviously handguns are very effective and with proper training are great weapon systems. But I think it's easier and people will require less training to do it effectively shooting a long gun platform. And I think a rifle is going to be a lot easier for most people to shoot than a shotgun just because of the less recoil. And again, having seen countless wounds from handguns of all calibers, rifles of all calibers, shotguns from buckshots to bird shots and slugs. If I'm going to pick up anything bigger than a handgun, I want to be using either rifle or shotgun ammunition because the potential to wound somebody is so much greater, which means the potential to stop them, to incapacitate them is significantly greater. And that's a huge advantage in your home because if you have a choice between picking up a handgun or picking up a long gun, but you have a much better chance of stopping them quicker with a long gun, well, why wouldn't you want to do that, right? And I'll give a real brief example. We had a scene where someone had kicked in the front door. They had a Glock with a 30 round mag in it. And this happened, I believe the 911 call went out about midnight. So the reason why that's important here is because most break-ins happen during the day when the criminal thinks that people are going to be gone because they don't want to have a confrontation with the people at home, unless it's something that they're picking, like an elderly person or a child who they know is defenseless. But here, that person, the person's breaking in, they're coming in at night. So they're expecting a conflict. The other thing is they had a Glock with the 30 round mag in it. And in Detroit, that's a hit, right? That's not usually property crime. That's a hit. So whoever that person was, they were there to kill the person inside. Well, they kicked the door several times, which alerted the person who was in the house to get their gun and just lock right out on that front door and wait for them to come in. And of course, when that person finally did break through the door, they got a perfect center shot. As the person was turning away, they caught one in the leg, and the person ended up being our client right there in the front door. So that's a great thing, right? And that has a happy ending because the good person was safe and the bad person wasn't able to hurt them. But if you're in that scenario and you had a choice between picking up a handgun or picking up an AR-15, you would be much better off with an AR-15. And that's a perfect example of a scenario where an AR-15 would have an advantage over a handgun, even though handgun is a very effective option. An AR, if they're sitting next to each other, would be the better option to pick up. So I agree with you 100%.
Yep, yep. And with a lot of rifle rounds too, I mean, larger than 223 or 5.56, you can deal with over penetration, depending on the type of place you're in. Let's say you're in a duplex or an apartment, you could be shooting at, shooting your neighbors next door, or, you could be shooting into another room, and there could be friendlies like your children or wife or somebody in the other room when you're in a fight. Whereas with the smaller but fast moving round, you can prevent some of the over penetration. And in the course we'll talk about different round types and what would fit your circumstance, because you could have you know hotter loads, so to speak, that would penetrate more than something else. But with a rifle round, have rifle round, essentially 223 is a small round that's fast moving, very high velocity round. So that gives you some versatility inside a home a little bit that maybe a handgun wouldn't have.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's a reason why, the AR-15 is the most popular platform amongst law enforcement, and one of that is because they have the ability to pick a lot of different ammunition that can really suit the different type of needs that they have in the field, and that's the same thing for somebody who's using it for home defense. I also want to bring up the issue that you brought up with capacity, because this is really important too. In most self-defense encounters, there's not a lot of rounds that are exchanged, but the one thing you never want to do is run out of solution before you run out of problem. So you never want to be the first one who goes click in a gunfight, because then you have to shift your focus from the problem that you're trying to solve to the gun itself. And you don't want to be in a situation where they're shooting you and you don't have the ability to send rounds towards them. So having that extra capacity is not about I'm going to shoot a lot of rounds. It's about not running out of solution before you run out of problem, because you can't afford to shift your focus from the problem to what should be your solution. You want to face a threat from behind a working muzzle. And I know a lot of times people are like, hey, I've got these really cool reloading skills. And that's great. You should know how to reload your gun effectively and quickly. But I think a lot of times people have false sets of expectations with that, because reloading on a range when the target's not doing anything is a lot different than reloading during a fight. And in fact, in real gunfights, reloads almost never happen during the fight. They almost always, first of all, they don't happen at all. Or if they do happen, they happen after the fight is over. So they didn't actually play a role in determining the outcome of the fight. A person, the fight's over, they've got a little moment to get their composure. Hey, I should probably reload, but by then the fight is over. But the idea with that is we want to have that extra capacity, because we don't want to be dependent on reloading our gun to keep it working. And I would say, if you really want to get an honest perspective of what a reload is going to be like in a real fight, go get geared up and get in the ring with somebody and try to load a training gun while somebody's punching you, because that'll give you a better feel for what the stress and time factor is like. You never ever want to have to reload in a real fight. That's a great skill to have, but it's not a skill you ever want to be dependent on. And having a reliable system with enough capacity that you're more likely to run out of problem before you run out of solution is a great way to set yourself up for success. And that's what a lot of this is about, Paul, because a lot of times what determines the outcome is going to be all the things we do before the situation in preparation for the situation. And I'm glad to hear you're going to talk about different choices with ammunition too, because I think that also plays a really big role in how effective that weapon system is going to be, because different circumstances can benefit from different choices in ammunition. What other type of gear are you going to talk about? Because when you look at people online, you can see them, it's like a Lego set. They got like 12 different things that are hanging off of their gun, and not all of those things are going to be helpful. A lot of those things might just be a waste of money. A lot of those things might just get in the way. So you're going to try to drill down on the type of modifications that are really going to make that weapon system more effective without making it more complicated or just wasting money.
Yep. Yeah. So, well, this kind of like spins off of what we're saying with back to round capacity, but also with what type of equipment we're going to have with our, with our AR and how we're going to store it and how we're going to access that stuff, what kind of modifications, what kind of sight system, what things we're going to have on there. It just to understand that circumstance. If your home is invaded and you're in the house, you're caught by surprise, generally speaking, and you don't have a lot of time, right, to access a weapon. So you're going to have to grab what it is that you have and then start fighting with it very quickly. You're not going to have time to prepare for a gun battle while someone's breaking into your house or kicking your door in. And it's not just going to be one person. Statistically speaking, home invasions involve multiple people. So now you have a situation with multiple people who are armed coming in the home. They're coming in the home with you in there. So there's intent to cause you harm, right? That's the assumption that they're going to cause you harm, at least enough to clean you out or get your stuff. But chances are they're going to kill or gravely injure the occupants. And you're left with very little time to access what you have. You know, so in a situation back to round capacity, I mean, you're also have very little time caught by surprise. But once gunfire starts happening, you can just do a YouTube search or something on shootings. Once gunfire starts happening, everyone scatters to cover, including you. And then from there, you're getting out of the situation. Usually you're not holding up in a fortified or stationary area. Inside your home, you're not scattering throughout the home to escape somewhere, which means that you need more round capacity now, the ability to do even suppressive fire versus just firing at the threat and then getting to cover, getting to safety, and maybe even getting out of there. You're not going to be getting to anywhere. You have to actually hold up and be able to defend that your position. So with that, we can't have complicated things or a lot of stuff that would get in the way or anything that would take any kind of preparation when accessing your weapon. You're going to have to be able to grab your weapon from wherever you store it. It needs to be ready to go and ready to fight right then. You have enough time to grab it, point it, and use it. That's about the amount of time you'll have in that scenario versus I'm going on a patrol or a combat patrol in Iraq or Afghanistan. I'm going to have a lot of different things on my body and things that are going to help me be successful for that combat patrol if I get in a firefight. A lot different, though, doing that than being inside your home, right? Law enforcement, same thing. Going into an environment where they actually bring their ARs out, they're going usually into an environment where the threat is. They're not being caught by surprise by the threat in their home. So that's a consideration that we'll have to have and we'll discuss when we talk about ARs, because you can go on the internet right now and get a bunch of information on YouTube on a lot of different tactical things you can do with your rifle. Some of that stuff's going to be bad information. Some of that stuff will be good information and it'll be cool, but it's not going to work in the circumstance that you're going to find yourself in as a civilian person who's using an AR for self-defense. So that's what we're going to talk about in the course. Everything from iron sights to sighting systems that we would use, flashlight, no flashlight, to put on the weapon. Are we something to assist with mag changes like a magazine coupler or not? Something to store a mag on the rifle or not? These are all considerations we'll have. Where do we store the extra ammo? Is there going to be a kit or a plate carrier or not? I mean, is that something that we'd have time for? These are all things that we discuss and build a tactical plan around. So somebody does this course, they'll have direct access to me. They'll be able to ask direct questions because one person might live in an apartment and not have any children, for example. Another person might have 3 kids and live in a house, and those kids are in adjacent rooms. These are all different considerations, and that's going to help them build. It's going to make a difference in how they build their their plan, around what they're going to have with their rifle. But the main thing is we want to keep everything as simple and streamlined as possible. So when you grab the rifle, you can point it and start firing, and rounds will land where you're intending them to land. That's the main and most important thing. Anything that would distract from that or require any kind of preparation or get in the way from that is going to be a problem. Most of these modifications and cool guy gear that and things that people try to buy to make their rifle look cool and tactical advice, it actually will take away from your ability to quickly get rounds into a target under the stressful scenario of a home invasion. So we'll make that distinction in the course and talk about that.
Yeah, that's great. So you're even going to talk about things like how to store the rifle so it's safe, not accessible to unauthorized users, but how they can get to it quickly in an emergency, because those are both safety issues, right? You got to make sure the wrong people aren't getting access to it, but you have to make sure that you have access to it quick enough that you can deploy it to stop a threat. And when we talk about this issue of home defense, this really is for everybody, because whether you're in the military or you're in law enforcement, you also live at home when you're not on duty. And you have to have a system that's set up and ready to go under those circumstances when you don't have all of your regular gear on. Because in a home defense scenario, the weapon is the system. You're not necessarily going to have time to put on a plate carrier or have a duty belt or the things that you might be normally relying on at work. So I think this is a great program for everybody, whether they're new to weapons, whether they have experience with weapons, but they want to check themselves, make sure they're doing the right things, whether they carry the weapon as a professional need, but now we're talking about how to set themselves up for a home defense scenario. And the best part of all of this is having direct access to you where they can ask questions so that they make sure they're really clear on the information and how the information applies to their specific circumstance. And then I also write, Paul, that even if somebody doesn't own an AR, but they have a rifle, that the things that they're going to learn from you are still going to be extremely valuable. Because whether they're using an AR or not, all the basic concepts are still going to be the same, and they're going to apply to any long gun system that they have. So this is not just for people with an AR, although we're gearing it towards that because it's the most popular rifle in the US. But anybody who depends on a long gun for home defense is going to have the ability to benefit from this workshop, talk directly to you, and get answers from you about how to best set themselves up with the system that they have. Is that right, Paul?
Yep. Yep, that's exactly right. So, yeah, absolutely. Anybody with a rifle could benefit from the course for sure.
Outstanding. Well, Paul, thanks very much for being a part of this show. Thank you very much for teaching the class. Thank you very much for being a personal friend, a training partner, and somebody who's on our instructor staff. I know you've helped us teach a lot of classes. You always bring a lot of value to those programs, and we're very grateful for that. Also, it's my understanding, Paul, that you have a YouTube channel. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep. You guys can go there. It's Apex Mindset. The focus isn't so much about, we cover these topics of self-defense and use of force, but usually with you, it's not the focus of my channel. My focus is really on mental fitness, mental resiliency, success, and relationships. So I'd say most of the discussions is about relationship dynamics and helping people have better relationships in their lives, and a lot of things on masculinity too. It's my primary audience is men. So we talk a lot about how to have a healthy masculinity in their lives and to bring that leadership to the people around them and into their relationships as well. So.
That's great. Excellent. And again, if people feel that this show is helpful, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast, share the show with others. Go to livesafeacademy.com/connect, where we have access to all of our podcasts, our videos, our articles, our in-person classes in the Detroit, Michigan area, and our live virtual classes that you can participate in from anywhere in the world, including the classes that we're going to have taught by Paul. Always live Q&A, and whenever appropriate, depending on the class, also guided skill practice. So they're not just passive learning, they're interactive, active learning sessions where you're dealing with instructors, just like you would in person, only you're doing it from the comfort and convenience of your own home. Paul, again, thank you very much. Thank you also very much for your service to your country and to your community, because I know you've been an instructor, a martial arts and self-defense instructor for many, many years. You have a much more extensive background than we talked about in this show. So you've helped people both through your martial arts training, your self-defense training, and of course, you've helped people through your military service. I'm very grateful for all of that. For everybody watching this show, stay safe and have a great day.